And as I'm getting older, I recognize a few things that happened in my life culturally. Okay, as I've said in the past, when I was young, I lived upstate New York in a place called Saugerties. But what happened was that Woodstock happened, and it was August of 1969, and I was obviously 11 years old, and we didn't live there much after that. We moved, but that happening had a real bearing and a real effect on the area. Okay, we were more or less, we were a very rural area, and more or less what I'd call an innocent place to be at the time. And Woodstock happened in a place called Bethel, which was probably an hour drive from my house. And nobody expected it. There was no report it's coming, but suddenly hundreds of thousands of people came into the area, and a lot of them didn't even really, know exactly where they were going and whatnot. They didn't have resources. Well, one morning we woke up, my family, we had 6 kids in the house, and then I went outside in the backyard, and there were about 20 young adults back there in the yard between the house and the back stream. And there were like makeshift tents with like big cloths and clothes hanging in the brush. And I didn't hear any of them say anything at all. So I ran back in the house, and then my mother called us all in and kept us in the house. My father wound up out there and telling them that this is private property and they have to leave, which they did. And there was no problem, but my father called the police, and they didn't show up. The consensus is that they had a lot going on because of this happening. Well, we stayed in the house all day. The windows were shut. We weren't allowed to look out the windows, but we did. There was nothing to see. Well, in a few days we went back to school, and things were different at school, okay? There was a lot of silence and quiet, and there were some faculty members that we had never seen before, and a lot of conversation about community. You stay in your community, and you're kind of like to galvanize you with your community, okay? And, I didn't really know what to make of it, but in a sense, I think the area lost a bit of its innocence. And, being a kid at the time, I didn't just gallivant off to the, into the village and know what exactly was happening here and there. But on Sundays, we went to church. My father would drop us, my mother and us kids, off at the church. And there's conversation and all. And it seems that for a while there were stragglers. In other words, right away after the festival was over at Woodstock, everybody left, except there were still stragglers and some people who didn't leave right away. And there was a lot of negative about them. Okay, the older adults talking about them as degenerates and hippies. They were afraid. Okay. Well, I think that had that never happened, okay, that I would have probably stayed there and grown up there, and there was an innocence to that whole thing, living on a farm and all. So it affected my life. Now, later on, a few years later, for whatever reason, my family moved out to a place called Massillon, Ohio, and I lived there from the middle of 8th grade through all of 9th grade. And the funny thing, I always knew it was a little strange that there was a lot of slap happy, jolly joy. I just thought all of Ohio must be like this. They were like, the previous generation seemed to have been a lot of farmers. A lot of the guys in school, their fathers were truck drivers, like, cross country kind of thing. And but there was no discipline in the school at all, really. And it didn't seem to have to be. It was like everybody just didn't want to disappoint the teachers. So when I moved back after 9th grade, in the high school, I was in Patchogue, Long Island, New York. And it was a bit of a cultural difference. There was now discipline in the school. There was a lot of finger pointing and cliques and whatnot in that school. And I never really, understood. And then, years later, with the computer and the eBay, I was able to buy the Massillon, Ohio high school yearbook from 1976 when I had graduated high school anyway. And I bought it because it was $30 and I could see the pictures of people I knew in 8th and 9th grade, which are nice years anyway, my friends of mine. See what they looked like and all. Well, at the end of the book, there were all the pictures of all of the teachers in the high school. I had gone to Longfellow Junior High School in 8th and 9th grade, so I never made it to the high school. But all of the teachers had, in the high school, had their pictures and their little pedigree, you know, where they went to college, where they graduated. Every last one of them, except maybe 2, had graduated from Kent State University. And I remembered right away hearing about Kent State, when I was younger, and I lived in Ohio. So I looked it up on a computer, and I found that there was quite an incident at Kent State University, okay, in 1970. Now, I lived there in 72 and did 9th grade in 73. If all of the teachers in the high school had graduated from Kent State, I'm sure a lot of the teachers in the junior high school had done the same thing previously. But in 1970, there was a protest, a peaceful protest with a lot of students from Kent State University, and some asshole called in the National Guard and shot at them, and 4 people died. Well, now that really does uncover what happened as far as the school system. These people running the school system, administrators, teachers, they empathized with the students. They were not there to be any kind of authoritarians at all. And I do know that that whole attitude affected me, and I brought that with me out to Patchogue, Long Island, where it really didn't fit, okay? I was not prepared for the activities in that school system, and that affected me.